but I don't front. Dopamine up in the MagSafe plug. Hit my line like it ain't just up. Pressing decline is a sugar rush.
My guest today is Jonathan Morrison, one of the original members of Team Crispy, I believe. Jonathan, how you doing?
Good. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Dude, I'm awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I've been hollering at you, if I can talk like the kids, for it's been I don't even know, a year or two, just some tweets here and there. Hey, let's talk on the show. Let's spaz out about geek stuff and audio, especially because I could tell, I followed you on YouTube. And by the way, radio listeners, if you don't know who Jonathan Morrison is, just go to YouTube. His content is absolutely amazing. Does a lot of audio content, a lot of new tech content, cameras, videography, cinematography, audio production. He's the man. You got to go follow Jonathan Morrison on YouTube, in all the socials and Twitters and all that good stuff. And I'll let him plug later on. But you talk about audio, and that's why I really wanted to have you on the show, is to talk about some audio. I see behind you, a good segue to this is you've been on this, is it Dolby? It's Dolby Atmos and Apple's 3D audio for a while now. What has your experience been with that, for those who don't know?
It's probably the coolest thing I've maybe ever got to experience on a maybe music and tech level. Mm-hmm. And I've talked about it, but I don't know if I've ever been more excited about one specific piece of technology, just because in the audio space, I almost feel like if I had to compare it to something, it would almost be like going from black and white to color in terms of like video, in terms of like that drastic of a difference, where... Right. Because it's one thing to go from 1080 to 4K or something, but it's better, but it's not like, oh my gosh. And right. This is, oh my gosh, especially when you can hear it in the proper environment, where it's a weird thing to stay going back to stereo sounds flat, and it sounds insane, but it's what happens after you get to experience it like that.
So that's an interesting question there, going from stereo to 3D audio and back and forth, and stereo sounds flat. Do you even bother making separate stereo mixes, or does it all when you're doing a 3D audio mix, do you just kind of automatically sum it down to stereo, or how does that work for people who don't know?
No, actually, you definitely want to start with your stereo mix first, because that's almost the foundation. And for me, I think it's exciting to almost get to have two versions, where you're going to treat the stereo differently than you are the Atmos mix, because it's just a different medium, and you're going to have more space, more room, because with stereo, you're essentially really going from left to right. And obviously you're creating width and you're creating depth and height as much as you can within those parameters, but you're in reality just going from left to right. And right. Atmos, it's infinite space, where it's in front of you, it's to the sides, behind you. But I think what separates it, and I think what, the people who are a little upset at 5.1 or 7.1 because that didn't really take off, I think the difference here is the height channels, because that's what makes it feel like you're in a box or a cube, but in the best kind of way.
Yeah, that's true. Because in movie theaters, I think that's a decent way to kind of equate it somewhat, is that 3D audio allows kind of more of what movie theaters have been able to do for at least 20 years or so, where it wasn't just, in the home we had 5.1, 7.1, but those speakers were in a single plane, around your head. Whereas if you went to a movie theater, those speakers, there were dozens of speakers around the movie theaters. You had not only like the center speakers, a bunch of center speakers and around your head in that singular plane, but you also had speakers up above and down below, so that you can put an airplane up above, like a sound effect of an airplane, up above your head and then coming down like towards the center, like through the room. Whereas just your 5.1 at home, you could get the 360 around your ears, but you couldn't get that top to bottom. You couldn't have a sound effect going from the top to bottom, or like a guitar solo or something like that going from top left to bottom right around your head, like 3D audio can. Another reason I think that 3D audio is becoming so much more accepted, and as much as people love and hate it, and I have certainly had my concerns with it. I don't know if you remember me tweeting at you this kind of stuff, but like Apple has made it more accessible to kind of the more mainstream consumer, whereas not everyone could have like 5.1 or certainly take 5.1 audio with them, and the what's the word I'm looking for? The psychoacoustic kind of 5.1 simulation wasn't really that great. But what Apple has done is using, what's the chip inside the AirPods Maxes and Pros and everything? They have a processor, an SoC in there that's handling just that kind of audio staging. All I'm getting at is it's become more accessible to the average person. So it's kind of this funny juxtaposition. Like, and that's kind of the next question here is, do you have any sort of aspirations, or have you released any music to vinyl? Let's say you had some big push. You had some followers say, hey, we're into vinyl, which vinyl's huge, and then 3D audio is huge at the same time, like these two different technologies. Do you have any intention to ever mix something for vinyl, or put something else, put something on vinyl?
Yeah, I think I'm open to anything, really. I think that's just a cool factor for me. Like, I'm very interested in the idea of blending the best of the new stuff and the old stuff. Mm-hmm. And I think, in particular with Atmos, that's a fun conversation, because I think a lot of people, it's either all or nothing. And some people might say, oh, you have to be completely in the box and you can't really use analog gear, or it's not the same in terms of mastering or mixing. But I think there are ways to blend things. So whether that is integrating analog gear into the Atmos world, or vice versa, printing down or mixing something for vinyl as well. Like, I really enjoy all facets of it. And I think as much as I am into the wave of the future, I am also very interested in taking the great of, what we have and what we have had.
Right. You're talking about this and I'm just like, oh, check this out. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Old cassette. So
right.
I 100% agree with everything you're saying there. I'm in love with the vintage tech. Obviously, I just held up a cassette to the camera here, but I also love the aspect of pushing music and experiencing music to the next level. And like you said, going from stereo to Atmos or stereo to 3D audio is kind of like going what mono to stereo was. So I like using all aspects of it. And I'll still, when I am working in the box, and what he means, if I can speak for you for a second, Jonathan, is in the box means like you're doing all your mixing and recording on the computer with a keyboard and mouse, and in some cases with a touch screen. I've got this microphone, which you can't see just off camera here, running through an outboard piece of gear, a Universal Audio 4710D. I can choose blend between transistor and tube amplifier. Right now it's going all transistor. But so I'm going kind of out of the box and in the box at the same time. And out of the box also means like you have a traditional mixer. Like you go to a recording studio where Beyonce's recording or something like that, and they're sitting there at a $500,000 or $1 million SSL or Neve with 32 faders or 48 or 96 even faders, and you've got an engineer sitting there pushing on the knobs, tweaking the EQs and the effects, and dialing in the compressor ratios and attacks and releases and da-da-da-da outside of the box. They're literally reaching around the real world and affecting how the sound happens. Mixing in the box is where it's all done on your Mac, or it's all done on your Windows PC. It's all done in the laptop. It's all done in the computer, where you're taking a mouse and you're dragging faders up and down. I want to make the snare drum higher here, drag the mouse up. I want to bring the kick down a little bit, drag the kick down. I want to bring the guitars up, with the mouse. That's in the box. So me personally, and this is my question now for you, John, do you ever, I like to take some tracks in particular, sometimes how I'm feeling completely depends on the song and the genre and the feel of the song, but I like to take some of the tracks at least out of the box and dump some tracks to a 4-track cassette recorder, or even my 8-track cassette recorder, the Tascam 688, which takes 8 analog tracks onto a cassette tape. I'll bounce it out to the tape, get that tape saturation, that warmth, and then I'll put it right back in the box because it's just so much easier. And a lot of edits are just impossible outside the box that you can do inside the box. Do you ever take some of your tracks and kind of take it out of the box a little bit and then put it back in the box?
Absolutely, and I think for the most part, we're trying to run, at least most of the major pieces of the production through some piece of outboard gear as it's coming in. So, I would relate that similar to how I might approach video, where I'm trying to make it as good as I can in camera or, on the way in this case with audio. So we do get, that actual analog saturation or circuitry, and if you nail it there, then it makes it immensely easier in post. And I'm a huge fan of just getting it to the best possible place we can to make sure we're not going to have to do, extra work at the end.
Preach. There's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And I don't care how good technology gets. If your guitar player is like, I'm not tuning, well, we'll fix it in post. Dude, no, fix it in post is like saying, do a great job on stage today, Timmy. You're supposed to say
Right.
break a leg. Like, fix it in post is a no-no in the music world and in video production world. Is like, there's only so much band-aiding you can do in post, and 99.9% of the time, you're gonna be able to tell that something has been altered. Like, really, if it's garbage in at that point, like if it's a take that I have to keep for some reason, like I'm gonna make the garbage in part of an effect. Like I'm not gonna try to sugarcoat the fact that this guitar was a little out of tune or something or whatever. I'll do what I can, but like, no, tune your friggin' guitar. And I'm telling you, drummers, this is kind of goes into the basics of recording. This is like where it starts. Garbage in, garbage out. Tune your guitars. Do some vocal warm-ups. Tune your bass. Drummers, tune your freaking drum heads. You can't be recording, a cardboard box in and then be like, oh, yeah, you can trigger it with some samples or something like that. Use it to trigger fake drum sounds or real drum sounds. But like, just tune your stuff. Make your instrument in tip-top shape before you record in earnest. That's kind of rule number one of making a good recording, is have your instrument in tune, get this, fix it in post out of your head, put something good into it first. Same thing with cameras. Get the lighting as good as you can. If at all possible, try to get the lighting right. Try to get your settings right. Don't try to all those add motion blur a little later on in post. Like, no, if you're shooting 24, get it to 48 and make your settings. You know what I'm saying, the shutter speed and everything like that. Like, try to do it right the first time, because people can tell as good as editing gets in the video world and audio world, it can be a little. You can kind of tell that some work was done to kind of fix some things. So in that vein of, I feel like talking with my hands a lot. In that vein of kind of the basics of how to get a good recording, I want to help people. I want to ease people's fears of getting into recording, and I want to ease some myths that people might think about getting into recording. I'm reminded of this. There was a tweet someone made towards you, I want to say a year ago or something like that, where basically the idea was, and I want to let you answer this, the guy was like, oh, it's easy to make good voiceovers when you're using a $6,000 microphone. What's your take on that, Jonathan?
I believe my response actually was, I'm actually using like a $600 microphone. And weirdly enough, it's a good segue, because I think now, as music has become more and more of a thing, it's kind of the first era where I've kind of dove into a little bit more of the higher end audio gear. Mm-hmm. But, early on, especially just starting out, I was actually kind of scared of high end gear, because I think it's easier to make something, not super expensive sound good. And I was always kind of afraid that I wasn't going to live up to that high end piece of gear. Like, if I screw this up, it's on me. Mm-hmm. So I was always about, how can I make the most of what I have? And for years and years, we used the Zoom H1, which is $110 piece of gear, mm-hmm. as our boom mic. And those were the Home Depot light days. And even to this day, for most of, I would say the past 3 years, the Audio-Technica 4053B is my go-to microphone, and it's about $600. And
is that a shotgun?
It's a shotgun. It's half the price of, like, you have like the classic MKH 416 or the M50 or whatever from some of the higher end stuff, but it sounds great. And you know, again, if you can make $100 shotgun sound solid, right? If it comes down to your placement, and you don't have to have the most pristine acoustics in the world, but placement and make sure your access is right. And so, yeah, I think my literal response to that tweet was like, actually, I'm only using a $600 mic.
Mm-hmm. And even going further, I'd be like, you can get awesome results with a $60 mic.
Sure.
The reason why Jonathan sounds so good and why everything is so crispy and everything is great isn't because of the money he spent, and isn't because of the money I spent on microphones or anything like that. I'm recording my raw audio into a $190 MXL V67G that I bought in 2003. And out of all the microphones I've had and all the microphones I use, I've got a vintage RCA 77DX floating around. It's on this big boom over here. It's a ribbon mic from 1947, I think, is when it first came out. It's been in my family since 1954 when my grandfather worked for RCA. That microphone, I don't know how much it is worth right now. Easily $2,000-$3,000, maybe $5,000. It's an awesome mic, legendary. David Letterman's desk, Jay Leno's desk, all those old school, Johnny Carson's desk. Picture a microphone in your head, like a meme of a microphone, right, or like an emoji. That's what the 77DX is. But the fact that it's this legendary, vintage, expensive thing in no way means that it's going to make my voice golden. What it is it takes so much work to get that thing sounding good in a modern world that it's a big time deterrent for me to even use it, because I know that I got to use it. Well, now I need a cloud lifter, which is basically an inline gain booster. I know that I'm still going to have to crank the gain on my Tascam interface here and going through my UA audio just because something costs a lot of money, like Jonathan was saying, it's not necessarily that you're going to damage anything, or that it's going to or make a bad recording or make a good recording. What happens with high-end gear, let's switch to like modern high-end gear, going from like 480p to a 4K camera, that's going to expose, what that high-end piece of gear is going to expose is just how much work you really need to do on the basics. My dad was in broadcast TV, and when they went from standard def to high def, ABC at the time said, "Yo, Alan, we need you to go have some surgery on those bags under your eyes and the wrinkles in your teeth, because we're in HD now, and it exposed these imperfections." So a expensive piece of gear is going to expose imperfections, but at the same time, you can get at least 98% of the way as far as sounding good with a $600 microphone as you can with a $6,000 microphone. That return on investment, that diminishing, right, there's a lot of diminishing returns when you start getting to super high-end gear. So that's one of the myths I want to dispel. For that person who tweeted, "Oh, it's easy to sound good with a $6,000 microphone," you can sound good with a $60 microphone. The point is knowing the basics, and that's what I want to get into here now. So, Jonathan, you mentioned earlier, even during the crispy days, the early crispy days, you mentioned using like Home Depot lights and not fluorescents, but incandescents and whatever, going on the cheap. The reason why you were able to make your stuff look so good and sound so good wasn't the amount of money you spent on the gear. It was the know-how that you had up here, the fundamentals, and knowing what you were doing with what you have. So here's a good starting point. Somebody just bought a snowball. What do snowballs cost now? A blue snowball, like $50 or $60, maybe?
$60 on the regular, yeah. They're definitely under 100.
So that's a very popular mic. Let's start with that. Let's start with how people can get a good sound out of that mic, since a lot of people have that mic. And I'll get the ball rolling here. Mic placement.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I talked about, it really comes down to what you're doing, right? Like if you're doing an instrument, you want to give yourself an adequate amount of space, so you're not super far away. I mean, just from a very basic level, I think from an audio level with that particular mic, that's something you're going to need to be close by. So you can't necessarily boom yourself with a blue snowball and expect shotgun results. So,
right.
If you can, get yourself some sort of stand if you're just doing a voiceover or a talking type environment, get it close enough, probably, maybe 12 inches away. And the cool thing with that is there is a pop filter more or less built into that one, I believe. Mm-hmm. And if it's not enough and you start to hear the plosives of the P's and stuff, then you can always add, an additional pop filter to kind of help control some of those plosives. But, really just basic things, make sure your refrigerator isn't blasting noise, right, or make sure your AC isn't blasting. If you can bear with turning it off for the duration of recording, I always would try and do that. Sometimes it gets unbearably hot, but again, it comes back to the capture it as clean as you can ahead of time, because the other part with that is once you do that, it's the less fixing you have to do after, the more you can just kind of be creative with it. So
right. And I was also going to say, even if you don't have a pop filter, you can twist the mic a little bit off axis so that your P's and plosives kind of go past the diaphragm, right, instead of just directly into it. So if you're looking at the camera that I'm looking into right now, a P plosive popping the microphone's coming at the diaphragm straight on, 90-degree angle. If you don't have a pop filter to deflect it off, what you can do is twist the microphone, and that what happens is your hand, the sound wave comes out at a little bit of an angle and kind of reflects off in a more natural way. And you don't even need a pop filter for that. A pop filter is better because it allows, better close miking and all that kind of stuff. But if you don't have a pop filter, there's these basic techniques that you can use to get the best audio out of what you already have. Everything about what Jonathan said. Start with a quiet environment, turn off your AC unit if you can bear it. Like if you're going to be laying down a good guitar take, by the way, to mic up a guitar with a Blue, which is a cardioid microphone, the basic general textbook way, and there really is no rule book, but the textbook way to do it, 12th fret, little off axis. If it's too bright, aim it more towards the sound hole. If it's too bassy, aim it more towards the fretboard. But 12 inches away, 12th fret, basically start there, turn off the AC, have your guitar tuned, record the good take, and you're going to have clean in, and then you'll have clean audio out, clean audio to work with. So you have that $50, $60 USB condenser microphone, a Blue, I want to say Yeti, Blue Yeti, whatever. No, Yeti Blue is like the higher end version of it.
Yeah, Snowball is like the $60 one. Yeti's like the $150.
Exactly. So you got the cheap Snowball that we're talking about for this case. It could be a cheap $30 newer USB condenser microphone. Just get those basics down, the mic placement. You've got it going into your computer using whatever recording software, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's some basics from there, some plugins that you'll want to get familiar with to really start shaping the sound and start bringing the sound closer to what you hear in like commercial records. I think for a lot of people starting out, like, why doesn't my sound commercial? What's the difference? I've got an expensive microphone, or I've got a cheap microphone, whatever it is. Why isn't it sounding the way it should, or the way I think it should, on whatever record I'm listening to? There's a couple plugins you need that are universal across all DAWs, all digital audio workstations, that you need to become familiar with in order to really start bringing your audio to the next level. I made a video saying mic placement and technique gets you 90% there. The rest of the 10% is knowing how to use plugins effectively. And those two plugins, just at the very most basic, and you can change the world with these, two plugins. You can change the world with a megaphone in your voice, but you can take your music to the next level. Compressors and EQs. Jonathan, so compressor basically, do you want me to go into what I'll go into what a compressor does real quick. I feel like I'm talking a lot, which I am. A compressor basically equals out the volume of the track between a whispering part and a loud part. it makes that volume the same. So what it does is it grabs the loud part that goes past the threshold and it brings it down to more equal the volume of the lower part. And then when you bring the overall volume up, the whisper is as loud as a yell, or a soft guitar part's as loud as a loud guitar part. You want some dynamic range, but that's another discussion. I'm just explaining what a compressor does. So the basic controls of a compressor are attack, release, ratio, and threshold. So I want to I'm with voice, because I think a lot of people are interested in getting in podcasting. There's a lot of people podcasting right now who I'm not hating on them at all, because audio is a whole different thing to know. But the audio game in the podcast is a little iffy because they just don't know the controls of the compressor yet. I want to know your settings. Do you have them on top of your head, like your settings for your voice? I certainly have mine. Do you have some basic settings you use for your voice, like a voiceover?
Sure. I don't do a whole lot. I think the way I would approach a voiceover and talking head is kind of the same. I'll generally set them up the same way, and just kind of boom myself either way. So no matter if I'm on camera or off camera, they're going to sound essentially the same.
Right.
I'm a huge proponent of Final Cut, and just because my familiarity with Logic, you get access to those plugins within Final Cut. And there's not really a lot, just on a basic level you would need to do. I might do just like a low cut or a high pass, just to get some of the dirt off the bottom end and the noise and the rumble.
In the EQ.
I like so I'll usually like low cut first, then compress, so that's not compressing any of the rumble, and then I'll throw EQ on top of that, to just bring out any sparkle or to take out any bad frequencies, which I also might do on that EQ. So corrective EQ, compressor, shine EQ, and then limiter is how I'll usually set my stack up. Right.
So my personal starting point for voiceover, like I'm doing a close mic voiceover right now for our interview here. I got the mic maybe 6 or 7 feet away from my face with a pop filter in between. My go-to settings for the compressor specifically is I do 3-to-1 usually for a voiceover. That's the ratio, 3-to-1. That means for every 3 decibels coming in, 1 is going out. And then the threshold you set to you look at the waveform and you see kind of where you're speaking the softest. And then I bring the threshold down so the compressor starts activating right kind of where I am speaking the softest, so that when I go louder, it's all the same volume. That's how the threshold works. So I bring it down to negative 12 or 20, wherever it starts kind of making that the gain reduction start activating. The attack on a voiceover, it may be kind of sacrilegious, but I'll do anything from like 0, like instant, to like 3 milliseconds. A really quick kind of attack time. The attack time is when your audio hits that threshold, how quick does the compressor attack it to bring it down to match the level of the lowest volume. If you're listening to this and it's all going over your head over the initial listen, just listen again as many times as you want to start getting it. Go to YouTube channels and online. There's all sorts of help out there for that.
I would plug Curtis Judd. He's one of the goats out there in terms of kind of explaining things on YouTube and tutorials and dialogue and EQ and compression and all that stuff. I've learned a lot just watching him.
Curtis Judd. I'll make sure to include the links in the podcast and YouTube and all that. So then the last setting I mess with is the release, and I set my release to around 124 milliseconds. I know it sounds really specific, like on the dot with that, but that's just having done this since 2002. Like I know for my voice and my cadence and my rhythm that like, okay, the release at around 124, the attack between 0 and 3 milliseconds, ratio at 3-to-1, maybe 4-to-1 if I'm really boisterous, and then just the threshold wherever I set my quietest passages. So that's the compressor taken care of. We'll move on to what Jonathan was saying in using Final Cut and Logic. The EQ, you do your kind of house cleaning EQ first, and then you do your compression, and then you put your EQ, your shiny EQ on top of that. So the EQ or equalizer, when Jonathan's talking about low cut, that means like I would imagine you're doing your low cut somewhere below 100 hertz, maybe 75, right? Probably somewhere.
Yeah, probably on a male voice, probably like maybe 60, 70, and cut all that. And I know it's also called high pass, and I just tend to, which can be a little confusing if you're like not thinking about it. So I tend to just like to call it low cut and say what I'm cutting. But yeah, I'll usually for a male voice, probably somewhere around like 60, 70 maybe, and then just kind of clean up all that on the bottom.
Right. So the low cut or high pass, they're both the same thing. A lot of audio terms, are kind of confusing that way, but high cut or high pass and low cut are the same thing, and conversely, low pass and high cut are also the same thing on the other end of the spectrum. See, I'm bumping my mic with my hand right now. That's why you put a high pass or low cut filter on the EQ, because as I'm bumping the microphone, it's creating a lot of low end rumble, and that doing the low cut gets rid of or helps reduce that rumble. With bumping the microphone, it's kind of hard to get rid of all of it, but the low cut helps with, like, let's say you've got that refrigerator on the background or that AC, or there's a lot of traffic going on outside your house, creating a very low rumble. All of that rumble is going to be coming through your mic stand, and even if you have a shock mount, there's still some tones that are going to be coming through in that lower frequency that have no business being there, and all they will do is take up sonic real estate and efficiency. So, for instance, let's say you're recording a flute player, and darn well there's not going to be anything below like 200 hertz, like with a flute. So bring that low cut all the way up, 150, 200, whatever, because there's nothing down there but like rumble around the studio that a flute instrument can't reproduce down that low. So get rid of it. And that's what helps. We talked about 3D audio and Atmos and even stereo imaging. What helps each instrument and each track breathe is really the EQing, and specifically that low cutting and high passing and high cut, all that kind of stuff, is giving each instrument its place on the stage to breathe. If you don't low cut the flute, then it's gonna those low frequencies just build up. If you got 16 tracks, 17, 18, 32 tracks going on, none of them are low cut. At the end, you're gonna be like, why does my mix sound so flat and muddy and stale and garbage? Dude, go through and just start adding the low cuts to everywhere. I'm not even saying EQ a whole bunch of stuff anyway, like boosting and whatever. Just go and low cut a whole bunch of stuff through your thing, and just listen to how your mix all of a sudden breathes. The kick is kicking and down in those low frequencies all by itself. Nice, and it has all that real estate down there, all that bandwidth down there to punch through and sound like a kick drum. The bass guitar starts happening a little bit higher above that. It's got all the room in the world to breathe, and the bass guitar is not reaching up in the higher frequencies to start interfering with like distorted guitars or vocals. Everything is just kind of sitting in its nice little groove. So that's kind of EQ taken care of. And again, we talked about Final Cut, which is video editing software, which is very similar to audio editing software. And thank God nowadays, video editing software has a lot better audio editing tools. Like I personally use DaVinci Resolve, and I love the audio suite in DaVinci Resolve that you have built-in ducking. I'm sure Final Cut has the same thing, and Premiere has the same thing. Getting to know the audio game, I've always said, the best camera is your microphone. Basically, that if you have a crispy Jonathan video and then garbage audio on it, like people aren't gonna pay attention to what you're saying. They're gonna leave. Like it's off-putting. And versus, hey, let's say your video quality is a little bit less, but your audio game is on point. Like people I believe will kind of stick around longer when they can hear everything legibly and clearly. So. I was talking about the Atmos and stereo imaging. EQ is how you let things kind of sit. Panning is where you kind of put them around your head. Let's go back a little bit. Jonathan, when did you first really kind of start getting into digital audio, working in the box, and what was the first program that you used?
Man, so it's a little bit of a kind of long journey, but then a long kind of break, if you will, in between that, because I got into, audio specifically and guitar, over, I don't know, 15 years ago. And I don't talk about it a ton. I opened up a little bit on the Tyler Stallman podcast, but, in a nutshell, not to drag things down too much, but I, got into music because of my dad. I lost him when I was younger, 18. And I think with that, I wanted to turn to music to feel better. And I just, for whatever reason, kind of couldn't. And it had the opposite effect, where I ended up kind of falling out of love with music. And it was just never the same. But, those early days, I think my first DAW was on a Windows compact PC, and it was called Traction. That was my first foray into any kind of music software. I think I eventually, I was on PC for a few years, eventually got an iMac. I didn't super love GarageBand because of maybe what I was used to in Traction. Immediately fell in love with Logic, and that was kind of always what I would turn to. But, between that and, kind of just not enjoying it like I did, then you kind of grow up, and then you got to have responsibilities and grown up things, and video kind of took off, and that was really my life for, the last 10 years. And I never wanted to let go. So I would always integrate music in some form or fashion. And anybody who's watched my stuff usually would notice that it's usually music driven, just because music is kind of the catalyst of what gets my brain going for an edit or a creative decision, or just anything really. And I think at a certain point I wanted to just kind of change that trajectory. And with the pandemic especially, it just kind of was more of like, what am I doing all of this for? So I would say, since 2020, I've kind of really put everything I have into it. And I think part of that was getting back into playing again, because people, I think, were sometimes confused of, here's this tech guy and he kind of really likes music, and maybe I don't know why. And, I got a chance to work with some really great people because of the stuff that I was doing. And, I often, I'm a huge fan of Jonah Hill, and I think some of the things I've seen with him and him wanting to direct and do movies, but waiting and kind of putting in his work in, when it was time, and not just trying to jump into it. That was motivation for me, in the sense of, I do get a chance to work with these great people. I think deep down I have something to offer musically, maybe not right now. So what I want to do is just put my head down and work as hard as I can, and get to a point where, hey, I can be in the same room with these guys, not from a place of, asking, or I don't want to say pity, but like, I want to earn my place in the room musically. I know I can hang with, some people on the video side, but I want to earn my place musically. And that's kind of what I've just been putting my head down doing for the past 2 years now, which is wild.
Man, I respect that from start to finish. The connection with your dad. My dad died in 2013. He was 65, and he is the one that got me into music. I was the kid in high school listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan, going out in the garage and playing for 8 or 9 hours after school, just ripping into Texas Flood and Voodoo Child and just playing Stevie Ray Vaughan, and having posters of Stevie Ray Vaughan in my room. Everyone else is like, Limp Bizkit and whatever else, year 2000. I'm like, Stevie Ray Vaughan. The other guy, so my dad and I used to go to Antone's in Austin quite frequently. Like on Friday after school, we'd be like, you want to go to Antone's? Like, yeah. We live in Houston, which is like 2.5 hours from Antone's in Austin. Right. And that's some of my fond memories. Everybody has this, especially like the father and son dynamic is never cut and dry one way. It's like even the best relationships are like it's not really. There's a dynamic there, and my dad certainly had misunderstandings. I knew he loved me and everything like that, but we certainly had that kind of vibe going on, where he's going through the teenage years, not knowing where each other is at and stuff like that. But music is what bonded us together and what made us friends in the end. Before he died, the last year or so before he died, was the only time in my life I can say my dad is, I get it. I get him now. He's my friend now. I was able to get that kind of closure before he passed. In the music, just like the gift of music that he gave me, his palette was so wide. Every Michael Jackson album, every Vince Gill album, every Stevie Ray Vaughan album, every Aerosmith album. Like he just loved music, and he imparted that to me. That's why I got into music. And I feel personally like I still perform a few times a month, like just behind the curtain here a little bit. I sing at our church and play guitar, and they kind of call me in like, hey, can you do this song? Like, yeah. That kind of keeps like the cobwebs off. But I feel like I'm in this kind of creative doldrum because I'm not blaming my son at all. My son is my world right now. But like you said, adult responsibilities, things kind of come along, and kind of like you can't devote as much as you would like to music. So I feel like I'm in that part of my music journey, which is completely okay to be in that part of your musical journey. You never want to force, and I kind of want to, this is something that you can jump in on. Sure. You don't want to force music. Music is supposed to come, like we've been talking a lot of technical stuff and Dolby Atmos and spatial audio and all that kind of stuff, but really stripping all that away, EQs, compressions, and microphones, stripping it all away. Music, good music comes from your heart. And if it's not coming from inside, if it's not coming from some emotional place, whether that's a good emotion or a bad emotion, if you're trying to force it, if you're trying to make music to make money, like that's your goal off the start, I'm going to make this music because I'm going to make money, you're going to fail before you start. If it's not coming from the heart, strip it all away. And that's kind of something that I try to do, is get out of this my man cave recording studio here and just sit down with a guitar, maybe outside, maybe with a notepad, and be like, what am I feeling today? Like, how do I get what's in me out of me? At one point I did that all the time. I was able to get what's in out. So it's kind of cool. Like, it's weird for us tech guys to say this, but like, get out of it, step away from it, and just bring your acoustic outside or in the garage or something, away from the need to feel like you got to track everything, and just kind of reconnect with that. Is that something that you feel from time to time, that you just need to kind of refocus on yourself and let the music come from a natural place before hitting record?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think music is one of those things where, especially in 2020, it was just more of like a mental outlet for me. So it made me feel better, and I think I would reach to a guitar if I was like, working a lot or stressed or anything. And I think, it's of course turned into one of those things where now it's, it happens to be another thing that's kind of the classic scenario of when you kind of surround yourself around the things that you like, it inevitably kind of turns into part of what you do as a living. But I don't feel like it is that, because in the actual contrary part of that, I think I had a lot of eyeballs looking at me like, yo, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you spending all this time on music? You're actually probably throwing away growth or money or whatever it is, because you have this tech thing that is doing solid, right? Like, why are you spending your time on this that maybe isn't making money and not necessarily seeing, for me, it was just like, I want to be happy with what I do. And music, as much as I do love video, music just makes my brain feel a different kind of way. Right. And I think part of doing this, as much as it's been fun to be in this and to make stuff and to get to live in this, wild setup, my favorite part has been getting to have someone come in here and listen to it. And it's very similar to, I would call it like the Disneyland effect, where it's like, for a second, as cliche as it sounds, like magic's real. And it's
Absolutely, man.
It's wild because, you know, music is cool because it almost forces your brain to visualize things. And, you know, with video, we kind of have that aid or that assist to kind of help us through that. But with music, it kind of just, it turns on maybe different parts of your senses. And, you know, you feel things, you get chills, the hair on your arms might stand up. Some people might close their eyes, some people might not. But just to see someone react and to truly experience something that they've never experienced before, that's definitely been my favorite part of this. Man,
so earlier today, while we were DMing back and forth, I was editing a video. I'm the YouTube channel manager for the Houston Museum of Natural Science, which if you're ever in H-Town, by the way, we'll cruise in my DeLorean up to the museum if you want. Anyways, I was editing today, and I was like, man, this video, why is this video I'm editing, like, it's kind of like making me tearing up. Like, I'm the one making this thing. It's about the battleship Texas, and it just gets, like, in my opinion, kind of more epic, like, as it goes, telling the story of this battleship and the sailors and serving in both world wars, and like the whole thing is epic. I'm like, you know what's making my hair stand up, you know what's getting my eyes welling up. It's not that I'm showing these, you know, epic drone shots of the battleship. It's the story blocks music that I've chosen to put on here. If people react to this video and love it for whatever reason, it's not going to be just because a small part's going to be because of the visuals that I'm showing you. But what's actually ramping up their heart and their emotions is what they're hearing. It's the music that what they're hearing. Because if you just mute that, the bed of my video, and you don't hear all that epic orchestra music and all that kind of stuff, it strips away so, like, all the feeling of the video. All of it goes away when you take the music out. So to what you were saying earlier, music helps you visualize it. Like, your brain is capable of so much more. And it's so weird to say this, man. Like, we're in this, you know, that we're in this tech world, all the high tech stuff coming out, all the 5K displays and 8K and 12K cameras and all the bells and whistles and spatial audio. Like, it's super high tech. But what makes us feel again is music. Closing your eyes for some people and feeling this music and letting your brain, and I'm talking even unaided by any sort of chemicals or smoke or anything like that. You just close your mind and, like, let your brain do what it's evolved to do, like what it's built to do. Like, there's so much potential locked away in our brain that I think, as cool as technology is, has kind of like compressed it, and like we don't realize how much our brain is capable of visualizing and making us feel. Then that we rediscover if you're able to go someplace, go to Jonathan's pad and have him play some music for you, or play with somebody else or whatever, and you feel what I can describe as, I mean, it's the most pure, and I know this sounds cliche, I know we're being a little cliche here, but it's like this completely natural, ethereal high that you get. Sure. It's like the most connected you feel with the universe or with your creator or with the earth or whatever, like maybe connecting with things you never even imagined before. It's coming in through your ears, man, and it's going through your mind's eye, or whatever you want to call it. It's when the technology kind of fades away and you're making the connection with the music, and that's such a beautiful thing. And I'm so happy that you're on this path. Like, I wish you, I don't necessarily want to wrap up here, but I wish you all the success in the world with the tech stuff and everything like that. But what I really wish for people, here's where the geek therapy comes in. And here's what I want to kind of steer the conversation into, since this is Geek Therapy Radio. Music therapy is just one of the most wonderful adventures you can do for yourself. So, Jonathan, I'm so happy that you're getting into music and that you're able to express yourself like that, feel things like that, even when you're like doing your clips on Twitter or whatever of like, here's the song I made out of the Windows chime or something like that. Right. That's a creative outlet that can create a feeling, but just that you're on this very natural, epic path of like reconnecting with your humanity through music.
Sure.
I hope that people listen to this and that's something that they get out of it too, that they maybe reconnect with the music, that maybe they've had a guitar sitting up on a hanger, or I mean, hopefully it's up on a hanger, but it's probably buried in a closet or in their mom's attic or something like that, that they maybe go to get the guitar out again or sit down at the keyboard again or something like that and start connecting like that. Because I would say, and Jonathan backed me up on this, like it's one of the best things you can do. Has it been kind of one of the best things you've done recently in your life, if not maybe a lot of your life? I mean, it's got to be great.
Yeah, I mean, creatively, I definitely think I'm the most excited and probably most fulfilled I've been ever. I think, you know, the fun part of this is just like trusting the process, I guess, is again cliche as that sounds, just because like I said, I definitely did have eyeballs, kind of like what are you doing? And then, you know, to kind of have a goal that you set for yourself and to kind of push through the parts where you're like, well, am I not doing this right? Or like, is this the right choice? And to kind of to see it from a distance, you know, back, especially a couple years ago, and just to work at it relentlessly and to start to have things kind of actually come into existence. It's almost been a little bit surreal in the point of like, you know, it kind of almost feels like happy tears in a weird way, just because sometimes it feels fake, or like, you know, is this a dream? And that's kind of the road I've been on, and something that I've tried to be more vocal about, and something I've been working on where, you know, I'm not at this place where, you know, this isn't like, oh, my life is awesome and perfect and everything is just like 100% always great every single second of every day. And this also isn't like a pity party of, hey, there were struggles and there were tough challenges, but I think that's what really life is the ups and the downs and the peaks and the valleys, and not everything is black or white. There's so much nuance to everything. And, you know, with that, whether it's music, whether it's gardening, if it's cooking, like whatever your space is that makes you feel that's what I would just implore people to try and find.
Right. We're all geeks about something. That's the motto of the show, is that we're all geeks about something and that you are worthy of love. You, sure. Jonathan, too. You're worthy of love. You're worthy of giving love, receiving love, and you are also worthy of your own self-respect. I think there's so much, and it's the whole reason why I started Geek Therapy Radio, is I didn't notice out there, as certainly not on broadcast commercial radio, which is what my station's on iHeart in Houston. It's one of the biggest markets in the world. But like you hear all this political division stuff, like it's trying to rip people apart and all this vying for people's attention by saying the most ridiculous, crazy things you can say. But it seems like I've always envisioned what I was doing as being a little voice in a desert, like saying, "Hey, you are worthy," you know. Right. And I wasn't sitting here saying you aren't worthy. Your liberal neighbor or whatever, they're stupid and they're not worthy of love. They're unlovable. They are them. Like sure. This whole division thing. They are them. Like, how is anyone saying we are we? Like we are us? Like, is anyone drawing a circle in the sand instead of a line in the sand? So I don't know how like I always said, like, I don't care how big my show grows or how, like, I hope that whoever finds it is able to find some sort of at least shred of peace in their life, or at least, like I've said in the past, like burn the words "you are worthy" into your eyelids. Not really. Don't go out and, you know, sear something into your eyeballs. But I'm saying, it sounds cliche, is how I end every show. You are worthy of love. You are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy of your own self-respect. That's huge. Sure. So that's kind of my whole thing, and I'm glad you were touching on that. And I know we can wrap up here. I know your time is. I've had you on for a little bit here. So life is peaks and valleys, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding preachy or anything right now, but I just don't think there's enough in the world saying this. There's enough outlets right now preaching this, for lack of a better word, that you are worthy. And some of the hardest times to feel that is when you are in those the valleys.
Sure.
And for a lot of people, I don't think they unfortunately have ever known what it is to be out of the valley. Like depression is a very real thing. It's a very, very real thing. In the past, when I was really getting into music and freelancing, after I went to audio school and I was freelancing around Houston, like teaching people how to use their setups, I was depressed, man. I don't remember any sunny days back then. Like I was straight up depressed. And so I sympathize with that darkness that people feel, that it's hard. You can't see the peak because there's so much fog like in this valley. So one of the things I try to do is when I have guests on the show is you don't have to, there's no magic pill that you can give that's going to fix somebody, but just there are words of encouragement. And I think if people start to hear it enough, that maybe if I say you are worthy and you're worthy of your own self-respect and you're worthy of love enough, that it sooner or later it starts to take a little, the seed gets planted a little bit. So
Sure.
Jonathan, if there's somebody listening right now, if there's people listening right now that are going through some hard times, you yourself may be going through some hard times. I don't know your entire personal story right now, but like, what could you say to people? What would you want to tell people who are in that kind of in that valley right now, maybe can't see through the fog?
Sure. I think, at the core of it, there's definitely someone out there who A, cares about you, and B, definitely wants you here. And I think is sometimes as hard as that is to maybe see in the moment, that's just inherently there. And I think, like you said, that's a very cool thing. And in kind of like parallel way, it's something I've tried to get better at, is because I'm very monotone and very internally kind of facing person. And I've always kind of been shy and awkward. And so talking is always the hardest thing for me. And with that, I've always had a hard time expressing just feelings, and that could be gratitude, right? So I've wanted to make it a personal goal of mine to be like, hey, I'm kind of not the most expressive person, but I'm going to let you know that I'm also going to let you know when I appreciate you. Because like you said, whether it is the exact saying of you are worthy, or, just give someone a compliment, and then something as simple as that, could lift a day or change something, and then that could pass on to somebody else. And, I'm a huge proponent of like the ripple effect and butterfly effect. And, every little move matters, especially in this world of chaos, where sometimes it might feel helpless or worthless, or what's the point, when, it's almost the exact opposite, where it's like, that's more important, especially now than ever. And from my perspective, again, like I don't ever want to sit here and come off like that, A, I'm so blessed and everything's perfect, and B, that I've had hard times, because we all at the end of it end up having hard times, and sometimes more than others. But I will say, any of the hardest times, I tend to not want to change things, because I think you don't really appreciate how good something feels without knowing how shitty sometimes the lows feel. And it's that juxtaposition of life, like I said, that, makes you really appreciate the smaller things. And like I said, whether it is music, whether it is gardening, cooking, whether it's family, right? Because that's something I've struggled with, not from a lack of wanting to spend time, but I just get so fixated into making stuff, where it's been an internal struggle, because I just love making whatever it is, and it's what makes my brain tick. And I can 100% relate to that feeling of, it's almost this euphoric high when you get onto something creative, where I don't do drugs, I don't do anything, and I don't know if I necessarily react well, because I feel like whatever the creative thing that I do is enough to send my brain places where I'm like, okay, like I'm a little up here right now. And, it's kind of forced me to be self-aware, and, to kind of round up that tangent to the answer is, A, I will reiterate what you said. Everybody is worthy of something, right? Like no one deserves bad, right? Right. And if I may not agree with you, I don't wish ill on you, and that's not gonna accomplish anything. So I think just, that's how I would round it out.
No, dude, I think it's super important and super cool, especially nowadays, that people hear, their favorite YouTubers or content creators in the social media landscape, in this content creation landscape. It's refreshing, and people need to hear sometimes that these are real human beings with real feelings and going through real struggles. And we'll wrap it up, but as well as I do, that social media creates this kind of this push to put your fake life out there and make it just look like everything is great. Oh, #blessed, everything is great.
Right.
Well, you may have a special needs, family member, or like your dad just went to jail, or mom, just some terrible things, and like that it's okay not to gloss over that, and not to make some fakeness out of it. Like it's okay. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's okay to hurt. You're not broken. Like there's nothing wrong with you to feel pain. It's not. I think that's what we're conditioned into with social media, is that I'm not happy, so I must be broken. There's something wrong with me. I'm not allowed to feel this way. I am being a bad person by feeling bad, because everything I look at is everyone else is doing great. And like, I don't want to be a burden by feeling bad.
Sure.
You're allowed to feel bad. You're allowed to feel bad. You're not broken. It's okay to be sad sometimes. It's 100% okay to feel that way and to feel these feelings, and just no matter what. And if you're in your high or in your low, just to keep telling yourself, remind yourself, that sounds cliche, but you are worthy. You're worthy of feeling the sadness. You're worthy of feeling this joy. You're worthy of giving and receiving love and giving out the love, and you're worthy of the self-respect. So like Jonathan says, and like the motto of the show is, whatever your geek thing is, gardening, music, tinkering with old computers, tinkering with new computers, making music on the new M1 Ultra or whatever, which isn't going to make you make better music, but it could still be good equipment. This is something we didn't talk about because we're just running out of time. Good equipment, there's something to be said for good equipment, like a $5,000 guitar versus a $50 guitar. That instruments can inspire creativity. So it's not to say that it's not to say that people don't. You should never buy an expensive piece of equipment, but you shouldn't buy it just because it's expensive.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that sentiment of, it's so much nuance, right? It's not A or B. There's so much in between. It's never this straight path of like, it's this or that, right? It's a little bit of everything, and that is life. And I think life is imperfect, and that's kind of what makes it what it is.
Yep. And you're allowed to stumble sometimes, and you're allowed to hurt. Jonathan, this has been an awesome conversation. There's a ton more that we could get to and want to talk about. Hopefully I can have you on sometime in the future, and we can
absolutely
wrap again. If you're ever down in Texas, or you're in California, right? I went to sound school in North Hollywood, just off of Lankershim, down in North Hollywood. Are you in LA?
Oh, nice. I'm like an outside LA boy.
Okay.
I've grown up I grew up in Southern California, so I've been here my entire life. But I've always been, maybe 45 to an hour east of Los Angeles. So
east, okay.
Yeah.
I was staying in Simi Valley.
Okay. Yeah, we're technically still LA County. It's towards the latter edge of it, but I'm close enough to LA when I need to be. But I do like not being in the chaos of LA, because it can get chaotic. Yeah.
I mean, I live an hour, and Houston's massive too. I live an hour from my parents, and you tell people from especially the East Coast, I live 45 minutes or an hour away. Like, that's a road trip. Like, no, that's just going for groceries for some people. LA and Houston are huge, and you can say, I live in LA, but really you're 50 miles outside of LA. 50 miles outside of New York City is the beach in New Jersey, pretty much. Like, it's far away, or you're up in Pennsylvania somewhere. Anyways, I could ramble on. Jonathan, it has been an absolute pleasure. Is there anything that you want to plug other than obvious stuff? You can plug obvious stuff too. It's all good.
Yeah, not really, man. I'm chilling, man. Like, I genuinely don't love like plugging my stuff.
Yeah.
You know, I love the music, you know, so if anybody does want to check out what I'm doing, I would say the Jonathan and Friends music. But yeah, I mean, I'm just appreciative of the state in which tech has kind of given us right now in terms of creation, because, you know, from where I started way back when in Traction to where things are now, it's almost limitless to where we can do anything we want, and
Absolutely.
there's never been a better time. So yeah, don't check out my stuff, just go make something of your own, whoever's listening, and I will be back again.
That is the best plug ever. Don't check out my stuff. Go do your own stuff. That's awesome. I'm still gonna do some linky-dee-doo-dahs in the thing there. But that's awesome, Jonathan. Again, thank you so much for coming on Geek Therapy Radio.
I'm laid back, but I don't front. Dopamine up in the max safe plug. Hit my line like it ain't just dog. Present decline is a sugar rush. I'm laid back, but I don't front. Passenger side in the max safe plug. Speak my mind, cause I know you know. Present decline.